AC, we are winding down spooky season. This is a special Scare-a-Thon episode of Beyond Hammerland. We'll talk about what that all means coming up in a bit. But what are we talking about this month? We're talking about a very interesting movie called The Blood on Satan's Claw, directed by Piers Haggard. It came out in 1971, and I had to put my mind in the frame of someone who was seeing this in 71, and the shocking violence involving children and people who are supposed to be children, and thinking, wow, this is years before, Children of the Corn. It was, when did The Omen come out? That was a little bit after this. 76. Okay, so this is kind of a precursor to a lot of killer kid kind of movies. However, I wasn't exactly thrilled, so I'm excited to talk to you about why we're talking about this movie.
As I was watching it, I was thinking, Ian, this may not be Ian's thing. So what's interesting is I just did an episode on the Horror 101 YouTube channel about the Woodlands Dark documentary of folk horror directed by Kira Janice. And they talk about the unholy trinity consisting of Witchfinder General, the Wicker Man, and Blood on Satan's Claw. And I was like, well, what do you know about that? Look at us. Look at us covering the unholy trilogy without even planning to. So here's my relationship with Blood on Satan's Claw. Back in the days when TV Guide was a thing, you would scan the TV Guide and you would look for the word thriller next to the description. It would be a drama, a documentary, whatever. But thriller really meant horror, because they didn't call things horror films back then, at least not in TV Guide. And as a kid, I was always, grabbing all the thrillers, and I would ask my mom, hey, can I watch this? Hey, can I watch this? Hey, can I watch this? And by and large, she was okay with most of the thrillers because she knew that they were monster movies and it was okay. But you just don't get away with a title like The Blood on Satan's Claw and telling your mom, hey, can I watch The Blood on Satan's Claw? And she's like, absolutely not. So I didn't get to see The Blood on Satan's Claw for years. And I finally got to see The Blood on Satan's Claw. And I think part of it was the buildup, but also part of it is just the fact that it's such an unusual film. I think it's very, it runs counter to a lot of things that we've come to expect from genre cinema. And I think a lot of it has to do with the music, and a lot of it has to do with the cinematography, and a lot of it has to do with the performances. But I feel like it, for me at least, it weaves a spell that I totally understand if it doesn't work on everybody, but I didn't see this as a kid. I saw this as an adult, probably like in my late 20s, early 30s. And I thought, wow, this is so different. And so it's a folk horror in that it kind of feels like it's really come up from the earth, which is kind of key to the story itself, but also is about kind of a rural community. It is about a community that is steeped in superstition. And there is a struggle between the old ways and the new ways of Christianity, and, civilization versus, the rights of the earth. And there's just a lot of stuff going on in it. So I really dig it. And now I'm curious to hear what you thought.
I had kind of the same thought that I had watching Martin Scorsese's latest Killers of the Flower Moon, which I just did a roundtable on.
I did not see this coming. Okay. This is not the comparison I was expecting. All right. Tell me.
Craft, I cannot give it any dings for craft. I think it is, it's a really cool looking movie, especially I watched it on Tubi and it looked like they had a really nice transfer of it. I mean, it doesn't look like it was, from 1971. But it's just something about the languid pace of the storytelling that even when the momentum starts to ramp up, it feels like it gets to a peak and it dials it way back down, and it gets to kind of a lesser peak and then dials it further back down. So
Yep.
I was frankly bored and checked out through most of this movie. It's something that I feel like it's an hour and 36 minutes long, and I feel like this could have been a really tight hour,
Mm.
with some crafty edits. Uh, I didn't find any like surprise or mystery to it. It's very straightforward, much like the Scorsese picture, which I don't know that you've seen, so I won't
I
like
have
get
not yet.
into that. But I'm used to movies at least trying to get a little bit ahead of the audience.
Mm.
But in this one, and with the other picture I mentioned, I felt like, yeah, if you've seen one of these, you've seen most of them. Now, I will say I did I didn't enjoy the shocking violence. In fact, I thought it was, really sufficiently off-putting
Mm.
and terrifying. I felt like unclean watching it because a lot of it does have to do with kids doing awful things to each other, but I didn't feel like the rest of it. I feel like that was a bit of punctuation in an otherwise pretty, run-on sentence, much like I'm doing now, kind of presentation.
Well, let me ask you this. You say you felt like you maybe weren't out in front of it. I I I would be surprised if you knew where this film was going. Like that, I feel like like there's so many different little touches that I'm like, I can't imagine that you saw that was going to be the thing. I mean, yes, I mean, sure, I can see like, yes, we're going to come to a confrontation and we're going to have the forces of good versus the forces of evil in a grand finale. But
Mhm.
it's all the little weird touches that I find are what gives it its special sauce. And again, I'm kind of like, I would be very surprised if you're like, oh yeah, I totally saw like that she's going to suddenly have this weird claw on her hand, or that he's going to hack his hand off, or that the judge is going to disappear for half the movie, or that, like there's just all these little things. I'm kind of like, really?
Yeah, now the claw in the hand, I didn't see that coming, honestly. When I say that, I saw it all coming, I shouldn't say the specifics, but I should restate that by saying there was nothing in here that surprised me.
Hmm.
Um, like, aside from some of the shocking, like, graphicness, is if that's even a word, of, like, there's a sexual assault in the woods, which reminded me of Midsommar,
Hmm.
honestly, the kind of the ritual sex act involving at least one unwilling participant, and then the kind of the hacking, stabbing death. Yes, I put on the spoiler
Yep.
banner just in case anyone's catching up. Um, but, okay, let's talk about the hand getting hacked off. Yes, the character is in bed and this giant fake looking Satan bear claw comes to attack him and he starts hacking at it. I'm like, yes, he's going to be discovered to have cut off his own hand. And maybe again in 1971, I wouldn't have been in that mindset, but I've seen too many of these dream sequence kind of things where it's like, yes, it's exactly what I expected. The judge disappearing for half the movie. He told us he was going to. He's like, I'm
Right.
going away to go look into stuff and I'll be back later. And of course, he shows up at the end to mete out justice against Bear Satan, I guess. Um, yeah, the one thing I thought was, I guess, kind of interesting was the one girl. What was her name? She was the very end, the one who got thrown into the lake. I
Oh,
have it written down. Margaret, if that's
Margaret. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
She is rescued by Ralph, the sort of protagonist of the film, and brought to the mother of Kathy, who was the girl who was assaulted and killed in the woods. And Kathy's mom kind of takes a real caring towards Margaret because she's just lost her daughter. She sees this other young girl who's in trouble. It's really kind of a tender relationship. And much like the other characters who are affected by this curse that's rocking this village, the Satan's skin or the devil's skin starts appearing on their bodies. That
Right.
manifests as like gray, scaly skin with matted fur, and
Yeah.
they get the idea to try and cut it out. That was kind of neat. And they put it in a jar, and I immediately thought of the end of the Blob remake. But when Margaret escapes, she runs to, and again, I might have this all wrong, so you can feel free to correct me because I was honestly checked out. There's more running and pointless conversations in the climax of Friday the 13th Part 2. I had to get that reference in there, by the way. But she finds Angela or
Angel.
Angel. I keep thinking of Sleepaway Camp now.
Yeah,
She finds
Angel Blake.
Angel Blake, who is the kind of the head mistress of Satan. She's the Malachi, or the Isaac of the Children of the Corn of this iteration, who's leading all the children into hell. She goes to find Angel. Angel's like, "You've led the townspeople to us," when Margaret gets caught in a bear trap. That was kind of interesting, but again, it's just surrounded by so much running and flat conversations that this movie needs an editor.
Okay. I guess I completely disagree with you. Like, this is absolutely, it's not for you, I guess, because all the things when you talk about flat conversations, I'm like, I find them very kind of, they're up against something they don't understand. And you have the judge, who is a man of reason, and he is forced to confront the fact that this is some kind of weird supernatural thing. And he has to come back and deal with it. And I felt like it, I mean, you say flat, I feel like there's a real gravity to it. Like there's a solemnity to it, and it's dealt with seriously. It doesn't feel like a melodrama.
No, I can't fault the performances. I think the performances are really good. The guy who plays like the pastor, or he's not a
Yes.
pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like the religious
Yeah.
studies teacher. He gets kind of caught up in this scandal when
Yeah. This like weird
Angel
children's
seduces.
hour moment. Yeah.
Right, she gets naked and tries to seduce him, and then she goes and tells the town barrister or whatever, like, "Hey, he tried to, he did awful things to me." Again, stuff I've seen 1,000 times, done very well here, but nothing surprising. But with the head religious guy or whatever who comes back and saves the town, this is beyond Hammerland, right? We've talked about dozens of movies at this point where you've got someone who doesn't believe, who believes in something, and then encounters the forces of darkness, which is forces him to rethink his religious convictions or his scientific convictions. I've seen it all before. It's well done here, but I just felt it was kind of
So
repetitive. Plus, it reminded me a lot of The Crucible. I mean, this whole thing is very much, a mixture of like Arthur Miller meets Children of the Corn meets other things that I've kind of referenced. And I think if this had been earlier on in just my horror kind of education, if I'd seen this as a kid, I can imagine this being like a top movie, because there is a lot to recommend here.
sure.
I just personally couldn't
Now,
get into it.
why does it work in the Hammer films for you when it doesn't work here? Because I mean, you seeing it in the Hammer films, that wasn't like the first time you'd come across that experience of somebody running up against, the logic running up against the supernatural. I mean, that, as you say, that is a common trope, but for some
Mhm.
reason it worked for you in Hammer, but it doesn't work here.
Partially, I think because usually in terms of Hammer, we're talking about either Dracula specifically, or with either Van Helsing kind of educating the people of the town and helping them to understand what they're up against, or not so much in Frankenstein, but that's more a matter of a man who's so full of his own ego, who believes in science that gets consumed by the quest to create something and then overtaken by it. In this movie, it's some religious people against a bunch of kids, and it seems more, I don't know, there's no like real intellectual adversary for the, I guess, the protagonist to go up against here. Most of what Angel does, I keep calling her Angela, most of what she does is hide out in the woods. She's got a few strong scenes early on
Mhm.
where she's seducing people or making them feel sympathy. I felt like if she had been more possessed and was dealing with the adults more on an adult level, rather than hiding in the woods, kidnapping children, murdering them, and then getting hunted down like a monster later on, it would have been more interesting. But it was just too much cat and mouse. And like, yes, I've seen this a dozen times.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess this is the thing, because it's done so well and because of all the weird details. For me, it doesn't feel like been there, done that. It's like it is a folk tale, and like many folk tales, it has elements of things that we've heard before. And so, yeah, for some reason, this one goes down just fine, despite the fact that there are things I've seen before. I think again, because there are things like the weird thing with the eyebrows growing. I was kind of like, I don't know what that is. I don't know why that is. It's something I haven't seen before. This business where the claw just kind of like starts showing up on individuals, the stuff with the Satan skin. I was kind of like, like these are all little flourishes for me that win me over. I don't feel like it's just another, occult movie.
Here's what I'll say. I would like to see Ari Aster remake this movie.
Hmm.
Because I mean, now I that's going to
We'll,
sound
we'll talk
weird.
about that in a second.
Well, I was going to say I maybe he already did with Midsommar, but no, it sounds strange because I'm criticizing a movie that's an hour and a half long and recommending that a director who makes movies are like at least feel twice as long as this take a stab at it.
Yep.
But there are some ideas in here that I really liked. I like the idea of Satan's skin, but honestly, in practice, in looking at it, it looked like, oh, there's some fur like glued hastily to someone's back. It just doesn't look good. And because I wasn't on the movie's wavelength, I was really tuned into like, oh yeah, that's a 1970s special effect. And that could be done much better today. Yeah, it is unfair of me, I think, to watch and talk about this movie because there are other films that are on my mind that came out 30, 40, 50 years after this, may have even been influenced by it. I can't say that for sure, but it's like I've got all this vocabulary and it's like going from reading Shakespeare back to reading Dr. Seuss.
Okay. I'm going to talk about some of the things that, like the music. The music it sets a whole other tone. I'm wondering if that was off-putting to you because
It was,
yeah, okay.
But specifically one note that's used a lot,
Yeah.
and it's entirely the fault of an in-joke between myself and a friend of mine. It's that wow sound,
Mhm.
which honestly, listening to it, it's strange because later on, you almost hear that as a comedic note.
Mm.
Like when someone's like bouncing or something, or there's some like really kind of heavy walking around, they go baum, baum. And so to hear that as sort of like, ooh, this is a chilly note or something, it was weird, but I couldn't take my mind off the fact that like this is used in other contexts comedically, but here it's supposed to
Mm.
be terrifying.
For me, it's about the brass and the strings. It's that there's like this melody, this refrain that is played perpetually through. And it has this, for me, again, kind of an unnerving quality to it. And there's an energy to it. I like the fact that it keeps the rhythm up. It doesn't feel like it's just a somber. It's almost playing against what the screen action is, in that it's keeping this kind of pop, 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 pop. And then the other thing I really like is the cinematography by the every third grade boy's favorite name, Dick Bush. Dick Bush, we've actually seen his work quite a bit. He did When Dinosaurs Rule the Earth. He did Twins of Evil. He also did a couple of films for Ken Russell. He did Tommy, he did Lair of the White Worm, and he did Crimes of Passion. And he also did the Michael Biehn, early in Michael Bihn's career, The Fan, where he plays an obsessed fan hunting down Lauren Bacall. But I really like the fact that we have these just gorgeous stationary long shots through the woods, the field where the plow is going along, and it's the thing that unearths the skull that starts off the whole problem. And then, so you have those kind of like just stately, really well staged tripod shots. And then we have these incredible, like, handheld, like jerky, like out of focus. And I mean, Dick Bush is like an accomplished cameraman. Like, this is all intentional. And I love the fact that he's like, I'm playing with form here. I'm not going to just do these static shots. I'm going to do something with energy. I love the high angles and the low angles. Like, I feel like he's doing some really incredible work in tandem with our director, Piers Haggard. And Piers Haggard didn't do a ton of genre stuff, but he did do the Quatermass Conclusion, which is the final they did 3 Quatermass movies made for TV movies back in the 50s. And then you flash forward to the late 70s, 1979, and it's called the Quatermass. Just called Quatermass or the Quatermass Conclusion, depending on which edit you're looking at. And what he does is very similar to this film in that he's talking about it's very kind of a post-apocalyptic. There's this group of like hippies who are trying to go back to nature, and they're called the planet people, and they think that the aliens are going to come down and basically rescue them from this earth that is dying. Like we are polluting the earth, and the aliens are going to come and save us. So there's a lot of really kind of there's similar themes going on between that movie and this movie. But I love the fact that, again, this feels like a film that is willing to take chances. It's not afraid of looking absurd. I think you do have to kind of go along with it. You have to be able to go along with the theatricality of it. You have to be able to go along with the fact that, some of the effects are not, as, I don't know, as realistic as you might want them to be. But for me, there's just enough good things about this film that I forgive it a lot. And I enjoy the ride that it takes me on. I hadn't seen this film in maybe 5 or 10 years. And again, as I was watching it, I was like, I don't know if this is going to fly with Ian, but I really do like this film all the way up until the cheesy ending, the anticlimax, where you're like, okay, what's going to happen? And there's that crazy scene where Patrick Wymark pulls out the sword and there's a freeze frame on him. Mm-hmm. And then it freeze frames on the crowd. And it never does that again or before. I'm like, what was that? What was that choice? It gets me excited that there's a director out there who's making these really bold choices. And they may or may not work. For me, I'm like, the excitement of him making that choice sells me on it. I'm like, there's no reason to hold a freeze frame there, but you did it. And that climax where, he's fighting the devil, monkey, wolf, whatever he is, with the sword, and then basically just kind of hoists him up and then throws him in the fire, and you're kind of like, that was it? Yeah. And I was like, wow, I was expecting something different, but I don't dislike the fact that this is what it is. It's different. For me, it's different enough that I'm like, okay, that works for me.
Yeah. I'm glad it does. For me, and this might be coming from, again, a modern sensibility and what I feel like I need sometimes from a story. This is, I don't know if this is supposed to be Satan or some kind of an old pagan god or something like that. It's called the blood on Satan's claw. So let's just go with that. This is the devil. Mm-hmm. It's demonstrated an ability to take possession of specifically Angel, and by extent, other children in this village. Its skin and hair manifests on these kids and causes them to do things that they wouldn't normally do, even adults as well, because during that kind of gang rape scene, there's some elderly people watching and rooting on these kids. It's very odd. And so at the end, if there had been more of an associate, because it's also a very religious community, these kids are in sort of a religious schooling and all that. At the end, if there'd been more of either an explanation or a struggle or something, like how was it able to take control of these kids and cause all this mayhem and violence, and yet a pilgrim with a sword shows up and there's no conversation, there's no one speaking for this thing,
but wouldn't that be exactly what you'd expect?
Well, yes, because I think that's good storytelling. Because in this case, it's just a monster. It might as well have been Godzilla. It might as well have been Godzilla with psychic powers. In that, we go from I loved the very beginning, like the first half hour of this movie, because I feel it was full of possibilities and it felt more in line with some of the Hammer movies that we've talked about. I when Angel is first like truly possessed by this thing, she has this look, this intense stare. It's all performance, but it felt honestly like the actress was taken over by something that was
Yeah.
staring out at me and saying, I'm in trouble just watching this film. But as it goes on, the intelligence of whatever is possessing this thing just seems to, and maybe that's the whole point, but that it was devolving into just pure carnality and violence. But there didn't seem to be a counter to it. It's literally just people showing up with the flaming pitchforks, metaphorically, and burning down Frankenstein. And I feel like the movie started out much smarter than it ended, and that was the kind of disappointment for me. And
Okay.
as far as the freeze frame goes, I, it is a choice. You're right. Part of my problem is a lot of movies from the 1970s would, and even the 80s, would end on a freeze frame. So in that moment, because they hold that freeze frame for like a second or two, I'm like, they're not going to roll credits on this damn thing, are they? So I was mad. And then I was like, oh, they're cutting to another freeze frame. But that didn't roll credits either. So I'm like, okay. And then the action started up. And then I got mad because I'm like, what the hell were the freeze frames about? What are you
Well,
doing?
well, I guess that's it though. What are they about? And I love I love it when a director challenges me as a viewer. When I'm like, what? It's kind of like it's so out of place that it forces me to go to confront it, as opposed to it just being, a regular old movie. And I feel like that's one of the things I really enjoy is that there are so many opportunities here where I'm like, why that choice?
This is, you talked about some of the other, stylistic decisions and cinematography choices that are made throughout the movie. This is the only one that I think really stuck out. I mean, because they are choices, they do challenge me, but and I'm glad it worked for you. But to me, sometimes I'm challenged by a director making a decision. I say that was just, it feels like you did it because you could, and you want to
Hmm.
get some kind of reaction. But for me, it's the equivalent of, what if when he raised that sword and foisted the demon up, into the air, if there'd been a slide whistle sound effect, that also would have been a choice. And I'd be
It
like,
would have.
no, that's really dumb.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess I don't think the freeze frame is dumb. I think it is. Again, it's a holding of action, and I'm going, what is that about? It's
If you're
it's not
talking
even.
about,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I would say it's not even like the slide whistle is kind of like running counter to the action on screen, which again I think is a valid choice. I don't know if it's going to work for everybody. It certainly might take you out of the movie, but there's something about the setting up. I mean, we are right at the beginning of the final climax, and that moment of freezing, I was like going, "Yes, here we go. It's going to be this side versus this side, and what's going to happen?"
That's a very good point. And I think this might help explain why, in retrospect, I don't accept the freeze frame.
Hmm.
If you're talking about it, it is the setup for the big battle, but the big battle is essentially still just the two sides opposite each other, and the two main forces in the middle, and the one guy, the devil bear doesn't even do anything.
No, it doesn't.
You get a couple of close-ups of this weird distorted face. It looks like a bad mask. It's hard to tell kind of what's going on with its features, and then it gets run through with a sword and then hoisted up, and then it's dead. It's
Yep.
not like, oh, it's not like the climax at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, where you've got Batman and Bane fighting each other amidst crowds of criminals and cops going at it. It's not. I think of a movie that we're going to talk about tomorrow night, in fact, or a couple nights ago, depending on when this goes up, The Devil's Rejects, which ends with a climax of the Firefly family in this convertible running at full speed towards a barricade of cops, and Rob Zombie does some very artful freeze frames
Yep.
intercut with that action. And in that case, I can say thematically, stylistically, whatever, that really works. With this, I feel like if the melee had been people like really going at it and had been more of a drawn out fight, that would have been a ramp up to action. As it stands, it was a ramp up to, eh.
Well, have you seen the Norwegian film The Innocents from 2021?
No, we talked about the Innocence,
Yes,
the
the original
old,
1960, yeah,
right, but
1961.
the new one, or the newer one, isn't
This
a
has nothing
remake
to
of that.
do
It's
with that.
totally different,
No,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
You mentioned it to me, but I never watched it.
There's something, well, I hadn't seen it yet. I just recently saw it for the October festival, but that movie also has a climax that is counter to what you expect. It is the lowest key boss battle you've ever seen, and I found it astonishing. I was like, what a choice that, because again, I kind of go back, I go, Piers Haggard at this point has shown me he knows how to direct a movie. Shown me. I understand that like maybe he hadn't convinced you, but I'm like, this guy knows how to make a movie. So when he chooses to do something, I'm like, this is an artist trying something, and it's an experiment. It's a failed experiment, whatever. But for me, I love it when somebody swings for the fences. It makes me so much happier than watching just a straight ahead melodrama where I'm like, because there are so many other films that I find so much less interesting than this one, including many films from Hammer, where I'm like, you talk about a straight ahead, like, okay, I know exactly how this is going to go. Yeah. Whereas with this one, I'm kind of like, I'm never quite sure where this is going to go.
I'll help, or maybe I'll help you understand where I'm coming from. And it's a distinction that I just kind of figured out, and I thank you for it. For helping me work this out in my head. I am all for artists. I'm an artist. You're an artist as well. You're an actor. By our nature, we create, we experiment. That's how we get out all the stuff that we need to express, right? The difference is we don't always let that out into the final product.
Of course, yeah.
You might try, instead of doing a German accent like the part calls for, I'm going to try a wacky Southern Californian just to stretch it out.
Yep.
And the director of the play might be like, that's really nice. Please don't do that opening night.
Right. Yeah. No,
but in this case,
idea of rehearsals and things like that. Yeah.
Right. So in this case, when Piers decides to do these freeze frames, he's totally free to do that. But when it comes to, and maybe this decision was made in the edit, someone I imagine watched this movie and said, what's up with the edit? Or maybe they said, oh, it's a weird artsy fartsy thing. It's kind of fun. Let's go with it. But for my mind, it just reeks of something that he tried it. He swung for the fences. Me as an audience member, I'm like, I'm glad he got that out of his system. I just wish that the movie, it doesn't add anything to the movie except for you to go, huh, which is maybe what he was going for. And it obviously worked on you, which is, that's cool.
Yeah. I do want to really quick talk about our actors, Patrick Wymark, who we just saw last month. Did you recognize him?
No.
He's the landlord. He's a landlord in Repulsion. The guy who plays the judge is the landlord in Repulsion.
It was the wig, and also the fact that this was in color. But no, that's great. I got to go back and watch both of those again now. Wow, damn it!
And he's also
a totally different kind of character. Yeah,
we will see him again in Witchfinder General. He plays Cromwell in that, and he's also in the Amicus film The Skull, which is kind of a Hammer light feature, not an anthology. It was one of their feature efforts. And he's in the sequel to Village of the Damned, which we talked about earlier this year, Children of the Damned.
Right. That was another, I was reminded of Village of the Damned as well,
For this one, yeah.
Also, I thought of, this is like The Omen, but with teenage girls. You could call it the Woman. Sorry. But all right. I think we've come to a conclusion on.
I want to say one really quick thing about Linda Hayden. Because if you notice, Patrick Wymark and Linda Hayden are both billed as above the title. They are Patrick Wymark and Linda Hayden in Blood on Satan's Claw. Linda Hayden had made quite a splash in a film called Baby Love in 1969, where she plays a teenage temptress who basically, infiltrates a family that she's adopted into and sets about, seducing the husband. And it made quite a big splash for her. Then she did Taste the Blood of Dracula, where she's one of the three kids who their fathers are sinners and they are killed by their offspring.
Damn. Because I love that movie, but we talked about that a while ago. So yeah. these are some great Hammer connections.
So 69 and then 70 was Taste the Blood, and then this one was 1971. So she kind of like her profile had lifted enough. And then one last bit is Wendy Padbury, who plays Kathy, our unfortunate victim of the assault, she played Zoe, the doctor's assistant, companion on the Doctor Who.
Really? I'm not as up on my Doctor Who as I should be, but that's great. I mean, she was, again, the performance is really good. Her performance really upset me, especially when she's being attacked in the woods like that. I got the feeling that it almost felt like she was really uncomfortable as an actress having to go through that. I don't know if that's the case, but I got that genuine feeling of distress as, before the assault happens, even they're piling on branches on top of her. It was like, oh, they're like twigs and branches, but it's still just the horror and the weirdness of that moment. It, was traumatizing enough.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, now that we've thoroughly discussed blood on Satan's claw, we've wiped the blood off of Satan's claw. We're on to something brand new and fresh. AC, we're coming to the end of 2023's Scare-a-Thon. So give us an update. Tell us briefly what Scare-a-Thon is and how people can get involved.
So Scare-a-Thon 2023, we are watching 31 movies over the course of 31 days over on the Horror 101 with Dr. AC YouTube channel. And these are benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We are raising funds and awareness. And we each night at 8 p.m., we're doing a roundtable review of a new release somewhere between, most of them are in the 2020s. So we've been covering a lot of recent films, many of which are streaming on Shudder, but also just some major releases like Pearl and Renfield and things like that. We're going to be talking about Talk to Me and When Evil Lurks, the new film from the director of Terrified. So that's what Scare-a-Thon 2023 is all about. So if you'd like to go ahead and swing by the Horror 101 with Dr. AC YouTube channel, you can check out some of our roundtables there. I suspect the link to donate will be below in the description here.
Yes, it will.
So please make a contribution. We're in the final days, so now's the time to rally and make a choice for good.
Excellent. Yes, definitely everyone out there get involved. AC has been doing some pretty hefty work this year, as he does every year. But it's all good stuff. It's funny that you mentioned Pearl, because going back to Killers of the Flower Moon, the live stream I did the other night, talking about the cinematography, I didn't bring this up on the show, but I was thinking about it. If they had used, I don't remember who did it, but the cinematographer for Pearl, if they had been involved with Scorsese on that project, I think it would have like blown everybody's socks off. I think someone on the show had mentioned, oh, you don't really need to see this in a theater, which is kind of a controversial take, but I understand it. But I think if the Pearl photog had been involved, it would have been must see in the theater viewing. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're talking about horror movies. And we're done talking about horror movies for this month. What are we talking about in November? Do you remember?
In November, we are going to be talking about the Pete Walker film Frightmare from 1974, which is absolutely beyond Hammerland, because it was a actual reaction to Hammerland. The Hammer Gothics were falling out of favor, and it was time for something meaner and nastier. And that's where Pete Walker grabbed that torch and just ran and set everything on fire. So I look forward to seeing how you respond to Frightmare. It's one of my favorites. Pete Walker's one of my, I just love, he's such a bad boy of Britain, because there was nobody else doing anything British horror wise in the 70s. And then Pete Walker and like Norman J. Warren were like the two just kind of kicking things up and flipping over tables and stuff.
You've got me super excited to watch Frightmare now and also talk about it. I can't wait for that discussion. But AC, thank you very much, as always, for hanging out and talking Hammer movies and movies beyond Hammer. And everyone be sure and check out Horror 101 with Dr. AC. Of course, support the Scare-a-Thon, support WRRAP. And also, if you like this show, like and subscribe to this channel and ring the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care.
Happy Halloween.
There you go.